So I should really connect to Hashem. After all, the Nefesh Bahamis wants to live, it wants to be happy, it wants to have pleasure. And imagine if a person would begin to understand that their true pleasure comes by doing what Hashem said, not the opposite. Just like as an example, if a person is resisting keeping Shabbos, and they can begin to understand how Adrabah, keeping Shabbos will make them feel more relaxed and happier and bring the family together, and all the explanations that are given, this is something that Nefesh Bahamis could relate to, because Nefesh Bahamis knows that it wants to be happy, it wants what's good for it, and the only thing is that Bahamis thought what's good for it is pizza. And now he's finding out, no, there's things that are higher than pizza that can also make you happy and it's also good for you, and so on and so forth. So the only problem is that Nefesh Bahamis is so passionate about its passion, and so wound up in its taivas, that it doesn't even hear what you're telling him. Doesn't even listen. He's not even tuned in. And that's where the Ola comes in. So he said that the club is like to do something that Nefesh Bahamis, something strong language to shake up the Nefesh Bahamis. And so to get it to stop and listen. And when it stops and listen, then comes stage 2. Now I can start explaining to my Nefesh Bahamis the goodness and the beauty and the value of godliness and Torah mitzvahs. Yesterday after the class, I mentioned to someone, I just want to say, I don't think that it's done today anymore, but I think years ago, this was what was done, that sometimes the child throws a tantrum, but the tantrum is so bad that the child turns blue in the face, and they're not even breathing. And it looks very dangerous. The kid is not breathing. I think they don't suggest it anymore. But years ago, what they used to do was slap the kid in the face or pour cold, freezing water on the face, and they're like, "Oh, what just happened?" And then you can talk to them. But if not, before you do that, the mother's talking to the child, and you hear the child screaming at the top of his lungs, banging his feet and knocking things with his hand, and doesn't even hear what you're saying. After you do that, then he's sort of stunned. And then he hears what you're saying, that what you want, I'm going to give it to you in a minute. Just calm down, So that's how Nefesh Bahamis is. They have to first stun it. And he gave the example what it says in Tanya chapter Chavtes, where it says that's the way we have to speak to Nefesh Bahamis, to do like the example I gave with this girl who heard something about intermarriage that was so shocking that it made her angry. She tore the paper to pieces, but the anger, on the other hand, made her stop and think. So we're on the page 6 in the booklet, and we are. Let's look at the last word on the line is mibachutz. Membez chutz, mibachutz. We'll start from that comma. This avodah, rak chakika mibachutz. It's only carving it out from the outside. So yesterday we gave this mashal, but here it is in the minor. Kamay, for example, goyme kli eitz. You have a block of wood, let's say a log, and you want to take wood from the log and make a keli out of it. Let's say a bowl for soup. In order to make it into a keli, you have to do 2 things. First of all, you have to cut it from the outside. And now you have a piece of wood to work with. You have to cut it out and carve it out of the block of wood. And then you take that and you make an inside that it should be able to receive. So you can't have the keli, if it's still not carved out of the general piece of wood, so first you have to carve it out. But carving out is not a keli, it only makes it now possible to turn this into a keli. Same thing with Bahamas. The screaming at it or the attacking it or knocking it is only carving it out from the outside, which means it has an external effect on Nefesh Bahamas that he's ready to listen. Once he's ready to listen, then he can make him into a keli. The Ruchni is the same as Ruchni is in Hagaza, this Indian Hagaza, which the Gemara talks about. There's a time we have to scream at my Nefesh Bahamas. It's to create a general bittul, and then Nefesh Bahamas should become subdued. And that's a preparation that now he's in a place where you could turn it into a keli. And how do you do that afterwards? By the Nefesh Elokis, using its intellect to think about the greatness of Hashem, and how that understanding affects my heart, then the Nefesh Bahamas becomes a keli, that the Nefesh Bahamas, its feelings, its desires, can start being directed towards Kedusha. Pirish la'olam yargiz adam hu. What does that mean, la'olam? La'olam means a person should always do that. I guess maybe the question is, we're not supposed to always do that. You're only supposed to do that as the introduction, as the starting point. And then later, you're supposed to work with more of an understanding. So he says, every person has in him anger. Every person has good and negative in him. Everyone has good midas and the opposite. But people have in them an anger and a rage. And that rage and that anger is gevura, not chesed, right? So what he's saying is, if you have a time where you feel that rage rising to the surface, what should you do with it? He should pour it out on the ra. Become very angry. Why are you this way? In other words, it means if I see that there's anger in me rising, I redirect the anger in a good way. What do I do with it? I use the anger towards my Nefesh Bahamas. I once was visiting someone, and he showed me a beautiful bookcase, and he said he built this bookcase. He had a certain business meeting, and very unpleasant things happened by the meeting. He was very angry. And he got home, he took a hammer, took a nail, and he took a saw, and he was up all night, and he built this bookcase. In other words, the hammer banging was how he let out his anger, which was a positive thing. He couldn't stop it inside, it was raging, but instead of beating up someone else and punching someone in the nose, he punched a hammer on a nail, and that's how he built his bookcase. So he's saying another way of directing the anger in the right direction is it should be directed towards my Nefesh Bahamas, and that would wake it up, that it should be able to hear what I'm saying. Yep.
Does this method of redirecting your emotions only work with anger or other negative emotions too?
Everything.
I would agree.
For example, what were you thinking of?
Like sadness or
Sadness. I don't know.
Anxiety.
Sadness, you just gotta get rid of them.
okay.
No, now the Rebbe does speak about sadness in Tanya also, but not sadness. Well, the Rebbe calls it merirus. You know the difference between bitterness and sadness. But it means that the Rebbe says that if a person is feeling sad, he does say it about sadness. Think about what I'm lacking, but not in a way of sadness that it drains my energy, but in a way that it motivates me to do something about it. We have to make sure that we don't go into a depressed kind of state. But yes, it says that about sadness. but again, with the intention to do something about it. One of the worst things in Hasidic way of teaching that I've seen letters and words and expressions regarding depression and allowing myself to fall into depression or sadness, like it's the worst enemy of a person. So we have to be very careful. But on the other hand, Hasidus talks so much about thinking where you're wrong. Even this part of Tanya we just learned, thinking in my nefesh Bahamas, you're so low, you're so good for nothing. So how does it difference? The difference is there is sadness, which is just a feeling where a person feels drained, and all they want to do is go to sleep or get away from everything. And that's a negative feeling. That's a feeling that has no life to it. The sadness, which is a positive sadness, is when it leads me and motivates me, and it's like a catalyst to just do everything I can to make a change.
So the first one, you just need to get rid of it.
That sadness, we get rid of it. There's a lashon from the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Rabbeim of Chabad declared all 4 death penalties for sadness. Skila, Sreifa, Herek, Chenek. You know, the 4 or the 4 ways of killing somebody, Rahman al-Islam. Sadness is like to be in the Daladamas of a Yid. Then the person gets sad that he's being sad.
Yeah.
The Zohar concludes, this is the weapon, Hanikra Allah. This is a nefesh b'am. By the way, you can use a simple example for this. It's like you want a person to change and you talk to them while they're sleeping. Is there any purpose in that?
No.
No. So first you have to wake them up. Now that they're awake and they hear what you're talking, they can talk to them. It's like the Rabbi writes about shofar, which maybe is a little bit similar. Shofar is a loud noise. The Rambam says this is to wake us up and to do tshuva. So what's the waking up? Same idea that we're so immersed in our Olam Haza, you can't even talk to me about. So there's a shofar, a loud noise, wakes me up, an alarm clock. Now that I'm up, I can hear what you're saying. So the Allah, that's the weapon to wake up the Nefesh Bahamas. Now we're coming to the other weapon, which is Remach. Remach is a spear. Which causes it says, in reference to Pinchas, he took the spear in his hand and he killed that man and the woman that were committing an Aveira in such a horrible way. So the Zohar says the word Remach is spelled Reish Mem Ches, 248. And it's alluding to the 248 Tevin the Kriya Shema, the 248 words in the Shema. In the Shema, from the beginning to the end, there's 248 words. And that's the reason why, when you read the Shema on your own, you're supposed to repeat the last 3. Are you aware of that? Ani Hashem Elokeichem Emes. But if you're davening by yourself and not the Chazan, then you say, Ani Hashem Elokeichem Emes, Hashem Elokeichem Emes. Second time. Because if you don't do it a second time, you don't have 248. That number.
Is it right in the middle?
What? It should say the small words, yeah. So he's not saying this is Krishma, but he's saying that from the Zohar we see that Remach is one of the weapons that we use to kill Klipa. It's Chilus Aveda, is the Zamer Aritzim, who be Psukkah de Zimra. If you look at the Siddur on top of the page, the first part of the davening, it's probably in the English as well, but definitely in the Hebrew. On top of the page, the first part of the davening, it says Psukkah de Zimra from Hodu, which means Psukkim of song. Zimra means song. But in Chassidus it says Zimra has another meaning. The Zamer Aritzim. There's a pasuk where it says the Zamer Aritzim means to cut out the weeds. You know, in a field, in a garden, you have in order for things to grow, you have to put in seeds. There has to be sunlight. You have to give water. These are all the positive things you have to provide. But you also have to weed the garden, take out things that are not good, and they interfere with the garden growing properly, right? So that's Psukkah de Zimra. We're weeding our spiritual garden, taking out what is negative. Who has sayif? Krishma who arema. That's the sword. Krishma is the spear. So why is this the sword and this? What's the difference? They're both the same thing. It's something that destroys the enemy. Just like when you use a rema, a spear, that takes away the life of the enemy completely. Through Krishma, you take away the highest from the klipa completely. There's a difference between the club and the spear. What's the difference? With the club, you don't kill the other person. The club is just to subdue, just to calm the person down. And the remach, the spear, is used to actually take away the person's life. In the terms of the spiritual war, apparently club is not destroying completely, but a spear is. The difference is the midas nefesh bahamis. When we talk about the midas nefesh bahamis, which is its passions and its impulses, there's two types. For aleph taivas heta. Taivas heta means permissible taivas. Taivas means desires, passions. Vabe is taivas isa. So taivas heta hanishlam eradaneva. So, being that there are two kinds of taivas, l'neged pchinas aleph, when you talk about the taiva for permissible things, which is also klipa, it's klipas noiga, and we know that the taiva to permissible things could eventually lead a person to become obsessed with taiva, and eventually could even lead the person to be attracted to taiva, which is asur. But because it's taiva's heter, something which is permissible, lochen, this is enough just to hit it with the club, which means when a nefesh of Bahamas has a desire only for permissible things, which is taiva, which is, yes, it's klipa, but there's nothing here that you have to destroy. You just have to turn it around. That this passion and this fire that's burning towards this union should now be burning towards something else. But the fire itself is okay. But on the other hand, when a person has a taiva for isur, for things that are asur, things that are prohibited, for that you need a sword or a spear, because isur you have to destroy completely. In other words, let's say a person has a taiva for food, you can turn that around. He's going to eat the food, but his thoughts are not about the pleasure of the food, but he's elevating the sparks of the food, or he's thinking that I'm going to get kaya to serve Hashem. So you don't have to destroy that desire. The desire is there. And you just have to redirect it. It should have more meaning, more purpose, more depth, more connected to Hashem. So a person wants to buy clothing, a person wants to buy other things. It shouldn't be for the sake of pleasure, it should be for Hashem. But then there's things that a person has to be eliminated completely. It has to be killed, so to speak. So that's where the sword and the rhema comes in. He does not go into the difference between the sword and the spear. I don't know what that would be. We'd have to do some research to see, maybe there's other places that talk about it. But basically, he's talking a difference between the sword and the spear versus the club. That the club doesn't destroy and the sword and the spear destroy. One is for taivas heta, one is for taivas isa. Now he goes into the fifth weapon, tris. Tris means a shield. One of the weapons that the Mishnah mentions is a shield. What's the shield? The shield is that the enemy is sending arrows in my direction. I need a shield to block it. The same thing is also with us. When a person is davening, the Zohar says, Shas Tzlusa, Ushas Krava. The time of davening is a time of war. And therefore, Tzrich Lubish Talos Tefillin. The Talos and the Tefillin, Him Nasin Mogeg or Michse, Mamanagid, Shemed Lenegde. They become like a shield that blocks the arrows that the Nefesh Habahamis is throwing at me. Lapilach has shown b'taivas, v'irhurim roim, all sorts of taivas and all sorts of negative thoughts. When do they come? Davke b'shas krishma tefillah, specifically when the person is davening. And here it makes reference to Tanya. Again, it's in your Tanyas, but I just figured for the sake of learning it together, we made a copy, I'll give it out. The Alter Rebbe talks about the fact, it's in the chapters, the 3 chapters, the Alter Rebbe actually talks about sadness. And the Alter Rebbe says, what about a person who's sad because in the middle of davening, he gets all sorts of negative thoughts. So therefore, it means that my davening is worthless. The Alter Rebbe says, no, that's not what it means. So let me give this out. We have copies here. Let's start with page 377. He's talking again about a person who feels down, feels sad, because in the middle of davening is getting all sorts of foolish thoughts. And in the middle of davening. So it goes like, starting from page 377, where it says, the paragraph begins with the word nevertheless. Nevertheless, he must not be downhearted nor feel dejected and despicable because of this occurrence, which is the thoughts during the davening Hashem. He must almost be joyous, should be happy. How could that be? On the contrary, he should draw fresh strength and intensify his determination with all his power to pray with concentration, with even greater joy and gladness. How? The realization that the foreign thoughts which occur to him derive from the klipa of the left part of the heart, which wages war within the Beinoni against the divine soul within him. In other words, it's the klipa in me that's throwing these thoughts into my head. 378. Neither it's known that this is the way of combat. When 2 people are fighting with each other, and one tries to destroy the other, that when one is gaining the upper hand, then the other likewise exerts himself with all resources of his strength in order to prevail. In other words, if 2 people are wrestling, and one of them looks like he's getting stronger than me, then I make more of an effort to knock him over. Therefore, in the battle between the divine soul and the animal soul, when the divine soul exerts itself and musters all its strength in prayer, this is chapter 28 in Tanya. The klipa of the animal soul gathers strength to counter it, to confuse it and topple the divine soul, sending him all sorts of foreign thoughts, so he shouldn't be able to daven. This refutes a common error. This is a mistake that many people make. People make the mistake that when foreign thoughts occur to some people during davening, they mistakenly conclude that their davening is worthless. But if one prayed properly and correctly, no foreign thoughts would arise in his mind. So it's a siman, it's a sign that my davening is worthless. So Alter Rebbe says, page 379, this would be correct if there would be only one soul in a person. The same soul that prays is also the same soul that throws in the foreign thoughts. That would be a sign that my soul is not really praying. But the truth is there are 2 souls, and each one is waging war against the other. Each of them wishes and desires to rule and pervade the mind exclusively, which means all the thoughts of Torah and all the thoughts of Yerushalayim, that comes from the godly soul. All the thoughts of worldly matters and other types, that comes from the animal soul. But the godly soul is enclosed in the animal soul. They're there together. Page 380. So imagine it's like a mushal of a person who's davening, and he's davening with kavana, but then there's a non-Jew who doesn't want him to daven, stands next to him and talks to him, and does it intentionally to confuse him, to disturb his davening. So that doesn't mean I'm not davening good. Someone else is confusing me, not me. Someone else is disturbing my davening. Same thing on an internal level. My Nefesh Haba'ama is disturbing my davening. So what would I do if there'd be a non-Jew who doesn't want me to daven, and while I'm davening, he's talking to me in order to disturb me? Surely the best advice in this case would be to not to answer him, not good nor bad, to act as though you were deaf without even hearing, and apply the pasuk where it says, "Don't answer a fool according to his foolishness," because then you might be like him. Which means don't even go down to his level to have a dialogue with him. So too with my Nefesh Bahamas, don't even answer it. And on top of page 181, here's an interesting principle. If a person wrestles with a filthy person, imagine there's a person that's covered with filth and mud, and he wrestles with you. What happens to me? I get filled with filth and mud. So if I'm going to wrestle with my Nefesh Bahamas, I'm going to pick up the dirt and the filth that's on the Nefesh Bahamas. So what's the Eitzah? Don't wrestle with him. Don't give him any substance. Don't give him any attention. Instead, pretend that you don't even hear him and just try to put all your effort into davening better and so on. So what does this mean? It means an interesting thing, that the time that's most conducive for me to get all these thoughts is more in davening than other times. How does that make sense? Because when Nefesh Bahamas sees that I'm davening and I'm trying to get closer to Hashem, that's when he gets nervous and starts throwing his arrows. So therefore, when a person makes a hachlata to move up in Yiddishkeit, and just when they make the hachlata, all sorts of interesting challenges come up, and they said, well, maybe I took on too much, maybe I made a mistake, maybe I done it. The answer is no, just the opposite. Because Nefesh Bahamas sees that I made a hachlata to move up, that's when he gets nervous and he starts attacking me, trying to stop me. One of the examples to give to this, by the way, is we know about Amalek, right? Amalek was one that attacked the Yidden, and it's not just people, it's a certain klipa. But it says, and every day we're supposed to remember Amalek. What is Amalek? When the Yidden were on the way to receive the Torah, that's when he attacked. So it says in Chassidus, when a Yid is on the way to reach a higher level in Torah and the mitzvahs and in Yiddishkeit, that's when Amalek attacks, tries to cool you off, tries to throw in doubts, tries to find all sorts of ways of making you stop off. So therefore, we need protection in davening in a way more than any other time. And what's the protection? What's the shield? The talus and the tefillin. L'chein leiv shenos talus and tefillin. Why? Because it's known that Ma'aseh mitzvahs are days that as levushim lenefesh. Talus and tefillin, we learned from Tanya, are garments. A garment is like wearing a suit of armor, something which protects me. It protects me from the klippos, and from the rocks that they're throwing, because Torah mitzvahs set up a block and doesn't allow them to get to me. Of course, your question is, so what do women do that don't have tefillin, and they don't even wear talus either? In some places they wear talit, but we don't wear talus.
Yes.
What?
Not tznius?
Why we don't wear it? No, I think the reason is
No. Is it tznius for us? The shield? Or no?
Sneeze is definitely a shield, but how does it have to do with davening? We need something specifically related to davening. Well, the answer is brought down from the Arizal that when the husband davens with talus and tefillin, that's also a shield for the wife. And what about someone who doesn't have a wife yet? Like some of the people sitting in this room. And Mirza Hashem, when the time comes, what about now? They ever said a very interesting thing, that guy who you're going to marry, Mirza Hashem, right now when he's putting on tefillin, that's protecting you too.
He also knows this?
He doesn't know it. Oh, he knows it, but doesn't know who he's protecting.
Okay.
He'll find out in due time.
Okay.
So you're already connected. That's interesting. No, because when two people get married, it means that the neshamas are connected. If the neshamas are connected, then all those things that it says in Chassidus is basically based on the Kabbalah and the Arizal, that when the man does it, I mean, even if a person, let's say Chas v'shalom, that's older and should never got married, but the fact that men do this mitzvah, the hashpah, the effect of it, is also for women. Naturally, in a case like this, it's stronger because her husband does it, or her future husband does it, and things like that. So now we have all the five weapons. We spoke about the sword, we spoke about the bow and arrow, we spoke about the club, we spoke about the spear, and we spoke about the shield. How it is all Baruch is. The truth is, it also said that this is one of the reasons why to give tzedakah before davening. The simple reason that's given is if I give tzedakah to another person, I'm being kind to someone. So when I daven to Hashem, He'll be kind to me. But it's also on a deeper level, is tzedakah is a protection. Tzedakah can protect a person if chas v'shalom is any negative decree. We know many stories that even if there's a decree and that chas v'shalom something's supposed to happen, when you give tzedakah, it protects you. Like the story of Rabbi Akiva's daughter and many other stories. But it doesn't only protect me from something physical that's a threat, it also protects me from the klippas that are trying to hurt me in one way or another. So giving tzedakah before davening is one of the things that protects men and protects women. In other words, the mitzvah of giving tzedakah is a general mitzvah, but the Rebbe encouraged very much, and this became common practice in Lubavitch and probably in a lot of places in the world, to give tzedakah specifically before davening. And some people have a custom that they wait till a certain part in davening, a certain pasuk, and when it comes to that pasuk, they put tzedakah in. But the Rebbe insisted that we give tzedakah before davening. And this is one of the reasons, because that protects us from anything that could be thrown at us to try to confuse us and disturb us from being able to concentrate in davening itself.
So would also be in the category of shield, tzedakah?
Yeah, tzedakah is definitely a shield. In Gemara it says that it's a shield that protects the person. That even if a decree, even remember we learned this in Tanya not long ago, the Alter Rebbe says how every mitzvah we should do it with zrizas. Zrizas means the sooner the better. But it's specifically tzedakah. Why? Because being that tzedakah has the power to protect the person from the decree. So what if chas v'shalom something was decreed on a person that's going to happen on Monday, and I decide to give tzedakah, but I'll give it on Thursday. So in terms of tzedakah, I'll be giving it on Thursday. But in terms of preventing this thing from happening, if I let Monday go by, I didn't have the protection. So Alter Rebbe says, therefore, if I do want to give tzedakah, to give it as early in the day as possible, so that'll protect me for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, when a person makes a achlata to give tzedakah, that also has an effect. I once heard from someone that he lived in Jersey, sometimes in the Frierdiker Rebbe, and those days the Frierdiker Rebbe his health was very poor. As we know, the last 10 years, the Rebbe was in a wheelchair and had a stroke and all sorts of, no, not a stroke, he had a different condition, weakens the muscles, but he did have a stroke also, but it wasn't as severe. So this person, this person spoke to the Rebbe, our Rebbe, after he went out of Yechidus, and told him that he told him that the Frierdiker Rebbe last time asked him about organizing a shir. So the Rebbe asked this person, did you tell the Rebbe that you organized a shir? He said, no. Why not? So I didn't organize it yet. I was planning to, but I didn't get it started yet. So he said, you could have told the Frierdiker Rebbe that you started already. He said, what? He'll tell me that I'm a liar, because he knows if I started on that. So the Rebbe said, no. In other words, in order to give the Frierdiker Rebbe pleasure, So the Rebbe answered, when a Yid makes a achlata to do something, to a certain extent, it's considered already a merit. So in other words, you could have said it to the Frierdiker Rebbe to give him that pleasure. Even though the Rebbe himself would always talk about people who make achlatas, and to make achlata that next week I'm going to get together and make a better achlata. But they make meetings, and the decision of the meeting was that next week we're going to have another meeting to really work it out, and the next week another meeting, and then I would always use the word tapara taplacha. It's Russian. Nobody here speaks Russian, right? So I can.
I speak Russian.
Oh. Anyway, if I'm pronouncing it right, it means the hammer on the metal. Basically, it means that when a person is using tools to build something, to make something, at the end, when he's finished, he gives the last sets. Like in halacha, it's called makeh b'patish. You give it a bang with the hammer as if this is I just finished. So the Rebbe would always say all the talk and all the conversations and all the excitement, all the sensations, all good. The main thing is ma'aseh b'peil, tapara tatlach. You have to do it. So even hachlotas, you have to make sure that it should come into the realm of action. So is it Russian? Is it Ukrainian? I don't know.
How do you say it?
Tapara taplacha. No.
No, the first word is hammer, tapor.
Hammer.
It's in Russian, yeah, but the second
Hammer is tapara.
tapor.
I think it's taplacha, which means on a piece of metal or on a wood. It's probably metal.
That's, I don't know. Maybe it's
Where would you know Russian from? Okay, so this is this part of the Maimer. And like I said, from tomorrow until Yutas Kislev, we have basically 4 days. I plan to go through the whole story of Yutas Kislev as much as we can, cover it. And Yutas Kislev is on Tuesday. Yutas Kislev itself will have a special program, learning and Farbrengens and whatever. What's going to be with this last part of the Maimer? We'll learn it. We'll get there after Yutas Kislev. Even though after Yutas Kislev, we usually focus on Hanukkah. But we'll get there. Yeah, it's a shit. Okay. I think it's brought down even in the Rambam. It says that when a man puts on tefillin and puts on tzitzis, it creates angels, and these angels protect them. You know, in Israel now, a lot of people are wearing tzitzis. They say you can see people walking down the street with tzitzis without a kippah. Because, you know, the tzitzis is protection. But someone told me that he saw an interview with someone, a very famous person in Israel. It's totally not religious, and he's wearing tzitzis now. So when they asked him, why are you wearing tzitzis without a yarmulke, without a kippah? Most of the guys they just speak to, they say, I'm not interested, I'm just interested. I don't know most. Some will answer that. He answered, well, tzitzis is in the Chumash, but cover your head is not in the Torah. But anyway, slowly, you know, we'll get there. So even though they're only doing certain things, this one's doing tzitzis, this one's doing tefillin, this one's doing Shabbos, but you see that somewhere in the back of their head, it's like, we'll get there. We're talking about literally became a trend. Someone told me there's a famous singer in Israel, a woman, that she wrote in her song, she made a song, and in the song she put in that on Shabbos she wears tznius on Shabbos. And it became a trend that people want to buy tznius clothes for Shabbos. Girls who are not from and don't keep tznius. So we see Mashiach trend is taking place in front of our eyes. Yeah. Okay. So this must be Isru Chag from Thanksgiving. What's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Which one?
Yeah. Yes, hello. How are you?
Yes, I am.
What class is thank you.
I'm staying till after I'll be right.
Nice. How are you?
Great.
That is amazing. We were wondering if we could, think about, house.
For sure.
Yes? What time?
We.
Okay. That's before the. Around six. Okay, thank you.
You'll be happy to, she have you had your deal with it.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I didn't finish your deal.
So she has to realize, yeah,
I tried to be on my. Hey, again.
okay.